So I'm not going to be really horrible about it. A lot of people will tell you, oh, student village is awful. It's not. It's not the nicest accommodation to live in, and it's definitely not for people who want to have a social life. So I came in, obviously
Can you
having
say
done
that again? Sorry,
foundation.
it went a bit blurry. For people
Oh,
who don't have a
sorry.
what? Sorry.
It's definitely not for people who want to have a social life.
Okay.
So if you want to go out every night, which is fair as a fresher, don't live in student village, because in Bournemouth, all the nightclubs are in the town centre, and every single other accommodation is also in town centre. So it's a 5-minute walk essentially to any club from basically any accommodation, 5-10 minute walk. The one I was living in was on the main campus, which is a 10-minute bus drive, or like 10-15 minute bus drive, with buses that don't run past 11, or at least uni buses that don't run past 11. You can take the local buses, but you might not want to be doing that trip at like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, or taking a taxi, because obviously that gets expensive. So that is what I would say. Definitely look at where your accommodation is compared to, firstly, your lectures, because depending on what course you do, some of your lectures will also be in the city centre, or like in the centre of Bournemouth, and then some will be in Lansdowne, and then some will be on Talbot. So it's
what was
like
actually like living there? So living like day to day. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. It's a house, so I'd come from being in halls, like a proper big block of halls with like 15 people per flat, essentially, in my foundation, and I was just like, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to live in a flat with like loads of people above me and loads of people below. I would just like to live in a house. So it's kind of, they're like little houses all bunched together in like this area just outside the campus. The houses vary in how nice they are to live in, because some are refurbished and some aren't. So the refurbished ones are nice, they've got nice wooden floors, everything's shiny and new and kind of a lot easier to keep clean, basically. And the older ones are kind of more, everything's like old carpet floors and everything's a bit rugged and just not as easy to keep clean and not as necessarily nice to live in, especially if you're someone who really needs to have like everything sparkling all the time, because they like the carpets you can't get that with these carpets, they don't come clean. Essentially, I mean, they're not gross, they don't have like mold growing off them or anything. It's not that bad, but it's definitely not like trying to exactly, it's not like trying to clean wooden floors. Essentially, they're kind of old English houses which are covered in carpet and like weird, I think it's called linoleum, or like it's like floors that's like blue and shiny, and you used to have them in school bathrooms. It's that kind of, so it can seem a bit grim, but the new ones are fine. It's just the old ones. It's just if you're unlucky enough to live in one of the old ones, like, do you want to risk it, or do you want to live in one of the shiny new blocks that they've just built in Lansdowne? And just living there is fine. Sorry.
That's fine. So living there was alright. It's just, if you get a bad one, it could be a bad apple. If you get a good apple, it could be a really good apple.
Exactly. Like the people you live with will also probably be different to if you lived in the centre, because they're more likely to be people who don't want to go out, or more likely to be slightly less sociable, or just like they just don't go clubbing, but you can do like movie nights or whatever. They just don't fancy going clubbing, which is really different to some of the halls in Lansdowne,
so
which is Purbeck.
So would you say that's the vibe? The kind of student village vibe is kind of relaxed, not go out as much, and movie night.
Yeah, I mean, there are still like houses where people go out and stuff. I remember during my first year there was like 2 or 3 houses where they were known as like the party house, but there wasn't many.
What were those houses?
Oh god, I don't remember which numbers they were. It was just sort of, it was random houses.
I thought you meant as an accommodation, sorry.
Oh, well, there are as well, yes. So I think it's Purbeck and no, not Dorchester. I think it's just Purbeck is kind of known as the main like party accommodation, and that's in Lansdowne.
And where did you live in your second year?
In a house, so in the same house I'm living this year.
And what was it like going from student village to a house?
I really liked it. I much prefer living in a house than in halls, just because it's a lot of pressure, because obviously you suddenly have to manage your own rent. You know, you're paying monthly rather than getting your student loan in and then paying it all basically straight away. Here you have to manage your student loan. You can't just pay however much it is you've got to your rent immediately. You're kind of paying like 400, 500 quid a month, and you have to, you can't run out essentially. So you have to set it aside. You have to be more careful with your student loan, I think.
Okay.
But, and obviously you've got bills to pay and everything separate. So you're much more, you have to organize yourself rather than the university being able to do that for you, essentially, because that's what they do when they send you an email saying your rent is due in like a month, and you just pay everything together and that's it, and it's sorted for the whole semester.
This is sorting it out yourself and doing it.
Yeah.
So what do you think where are you living in your final year?
I'm living in the same house I was during my second year. So I'm living out in Winton.
Okay.
And I think it's quite a student-y road, but it's still a mix. So we have like I think either side we've got families living there with young kids.
Okay.
So you will also have to be a bit more careful with if you're throwing parties a lot, you might get noise complaints. That's another thing that, depending on what kind of household you are, we're not really into like throwing house parties, obviously at the moment, not really a thing we could be doing given the current circumstances. But if you are that kind of house, or like, if you just enjoy like often playing loud music, you have to just be a bit more aware that you might share a wall with someone else. So, if these are semi-detached houses, you are sharing a wall with another flat or like another house, and it might be students, but they might not, and they might have like 8-year-old kids that need to be at school at like 7 o'clock in the morning, like, so it's just
be careful.
Be careful. Don't.
What do you think?
I'm definitely not saying don't throw house parties or anything. I'm just saying, like, be aware that there is a possibility that someone might complain if you're being really, really loud or accidentally trash something that's not yours to trash.
What do you think the best form of accommodation is?
I mean,
for first years.
For first years, it really depends on what kind of person you are. If you want to be going out and like going to flat parties and doing like hosting pre-drinks all the time, if you want to be hosting pre's, live in Purbeck, because that is essentially where it's at for any kind of anything like that. I mean, most student halls in town, like, you're fine with that, but that's like the one that's like known as like the party halls. Yeah, exactly. I think, oh god, what's it called?
Let's say best for price.
Best for price.
If you don't really have one, that's all right too, because obviously as a final year there's been new ones built as you've gone through.
Well, so I know Bellaton, I've got like a group of course mates that live there, and I know that they're not good for price. So that's one that I wouldn't necessarily suggest, because they're quite expensive, but a lot of the stuff is so like the rooms look nice and they look clean, and obviously it's still quite new, but it's like mass bought stuff. So like for example, the couches and the TV and stuff is mass. It's bulk. They're just bulk bought from, I don't know where. I think a couple of Chinese companies.
Okay, so it's not anything good. It's just
so basic. But you're paying a lot. They have a gym and they have a cinema room, so that's probably also what you're paying. But you're definitely not paying for a nice quality room.